Am I right? Are you right? Is he right? Is she right? Are they right? Is everyone right? The answer is that everyone has a different moral view, thus nobody is objectively right or wrong. Well, that's moral relativism in a nutshell. Now you can leave the video if you want. You're still here. That means I can roll the intro in. Different cultures, different times, different arguments. Moral relativism takes all of the views of several cultures into account over the period of thousands of years, before the Socratic philosophers and the birth of Queen Elizabeth II. Okay, that one is a lie. Mahavira came up with the principle that the truth and reality are always viewed uniquely, depending on who views it. This might sound like common sense, but in actuality, no one believes in such a manner, especially in the history where the Catholic Church was like, yo bro, that's a nice little different view you have got. Would be a shame if the god punished you. Moving towards the Greek side of things, Protagoras famously said, man is the measure of all things. While similarly, Empiricus and other Pyrrhonist philosophers disputed the dogmatists and realized the BS of their objective morality. Now skipping the Middle Ages, or as I like to call, the power of God and anime is at my side ages. Baruch Spinoza also notably held the same perspective, as his views were built on the non-reality of evil. He stated that all things which exist in nature are either things or actions. Now good and evil are neither things nor actions, therefore good and evil do not exist in nature. David Hume, the father of modern relativism, whom we all love of course, again comes in with his fork. I have discussed Hume's fork in more detail in the Guide to Logical Empiricism. Check it out, or I'll poke you with Hume's fork. Anyhow, he distinguished matter of facts and matter of values, and said that the moral judgments were part of the latter, as our views are not formed by factual information, but over what we experience and feel. He famously spoke against objective morality and said that the universe did not give a damn shit about how you feel, just like facts don't care about your feeling. Friedrich Nietzsche believed that we are able to assess the worth of our values by ourselves, as values are relative to oneself. Nietzsche confirmed that there was an issue with the morality of each era, where the powerful and wealthy tend to define what values are good and what are bad. This causes a person who is considered to be a good man to be worth more than the bad man. This good and bad is subjected only to the morals we follow. It could be an alternate reality. A good man could be a bad man, and a bad man could be good. For example, if browsing Reddit was highly valued, then I wouldn't be considered as a useless individual. Yes, mom, I'm not as useless as you think. But wait, what is thought of as good and bad is relative. Well, Nietzsche says that one can construct their own values relative to what one is, instead of following the herd like a brainwashed little sheep. If we further talk about how Nietzsche criticized the prejudice of the philosophers, then we will be sitting here for hours and hours, if not days. Ruth Benedict created awareness against the ethnocentrism, where one tends to judge other cultures and beliefs according to their own culture. She wrote in her book, Patrons of Culture, that, to the anthropologist, our customs and those of New Guinea tribe are two possible social schemes for dealing with a common problem, and insofar as he remains an anthropologist, he is bound to avoid any weighting of one in favor of the other. It is not just the philosophers who ask the same question, but it concerns many, including the social scientists, that whether any absolute morality exists or not. This theory is covered in detail by Edward Westermarck, who argues that all morals are dependent on an individual's upbringing. Basically, when you're a baby, you don't tend to think whether values of theology or atheism are better than one another. Hey mommy, I'm converting to Paleolithic religion just because every other belief sucks. Edward Westermarck rejects George Edward Moore's ethical intuitionism, where one can find the absolute truth with a special sixth sense of intuition without having the knowledge of other truths. Oh boy, sounds like some hot BS. Wait, I shall faint before I myself step in the trap of calling one philosophy better than another. Nah, still sounds like BS to me. Now if we talk about type of different flavors, there are three that you can get, which are descriptive, meta-ethical, and normative moral relativism. Beginning with descriptive, it literally describes that disagreements are certain to rise over what path is the right one to take. This occurs due to how cultures tend to have different moral values. The characteristic that differs the descriptive moral relativist are that they don't encourage you to be tolerant of all behaviors over the disagreements, while they also don't attach themselves to the semantics, ontology, and epistemology of moral judgment. This could be the reason why the descriptive moral relativists occur more often in the social and anthropological framework of things, while meta-ethical moral relativists are kinda not everyone's cup of tea, as over the years many have criticized it. I mean, it could be due to the fact that they basically gave the absolute truth the middle finger and said there exists no good or evil, but just traditions, convictions, and practices of society. This idea was supported by the American anthropologist William Graham, who argues in his book Folkways that right and wrong are molded by the tradition and culture. Due to such reasoning, a moral that is outside the local culture one is in cannot be justified to be higher in standing than the inside culture. So we can see that the meta-ethical moral relativists in their basic state are descriptive moral relativists, as they state that disagreements will tend to occur over what is wrong or right. Then they evolve and state further that one cannot simply justify their disagreement just by one simple standard, as this standard is likely to originate from personal or cultural beliefs. In contrast, moral universalism debates that disagreements do occur, and there are stubborn sons of guns out there who cannot be persuaded. But in a sense, there do exist moral actions that can be morally preferred more than another action. Thus, moral actions are to be evaluated according to a moral standard called moral facts, even if they are not universally accepted. This idea could be seen as a milder version of moral absolutism, but not same as it. Well, I would like to cover the other side in another video. For now, let's move to the final flavor of moral relativism. The final evolution of this philosophy not only believes in the conclusion of meta-ethical moral relativism, but tells us what we need to do. Oh my, such a dictator are we, huh? Normative moral relativism ought us to tolerate the behavior of other cultures, even if they're polar opposite of our own morals. Oh, do you hear the knocks? I think the contradiction is at the door, as a normative moral relativist cannot just simply say, "We think it is moral for one to tolerate behavior," without adding, "Other people think that intolerance of certain behaviors is moral." Similarly, Russell Blackford argues that sometimes intolerance is important as well. As he said, we need not adopt a quietism about moral traditions that cause hardship and suffering. Nor need we passively accept the moral norms of our own respective societies to the extent that they are ineffective or counterproductive or simply unnecessary. It is seen as practical and perfectly normal for one to defend one's own views, even if universal truth does not exist. As we see, meta-ethical moral relativism has fallen flat on its face, so why not just beat it even more by providing you with who really criticized this philosophy exactly? An English moral philosopher, Richard Hare, argued that moral propositions were bounded by logical statements. Thing is, they tend to have no factual information but depends on the cultural norms instead. According to Hare, moral relativism tends to have logical constraints which it cannot avoid. In addition to that, all morals under this philosophy are treated as similar to each other when evaluated, thus measured in a sense. In a non-moral sense, we could say, this is some good content, or this is some bad content. This evaluative property of certain terms can create a situation where different cultures and societies can have a meaningful and respectful discussion on moral questions instead of being like, "Oh, moral relativism told me not to listen to what you believe in, as everything is relative, so I can believe in whatever I want to believe in, mom." Many other philosophers believe that this philosophy fails as it rejects basic premises of discussion of morality, thus also failing to arbitrate disagreements. It is suggested that the meta-ethical moral relativists tend to avoid discussions of normative morality as they tend to reject such scenarios, which being that the rightness and wrongness of an action can be found through the implementation of logical reasoning. Critics argue such pathing can lead to meta-ethical relativists to moral nihilism. Another argument that many critics hold is the question of how one can determine the relativeness of moral truth. For example, if you roam around the multicultural hubs such as New York, you can find people who belong to many groups based on culture, religion, and race. Thus, it is hard to find out which values and groups tend to influence the individual, as part of the philosophy is to find how one person's beliefs are in comparison to another person's, ultimately making life freaking hard for meta-ethical moral relativists. There are many other arguments that are forwarded from theological world, but I think we all know those criticisms. But still, I would like to end the video over the quotation of a Buddhist monk. Bhikkhu Bodhi writes, "By assigning value and spiritual ideals to private subjectivity, the materialistic worldview threatens to undermine any secure objective foundation for morality. The result is the widespread moral degeneration that we witness today. To counter this tendency, the mere moral exhortation is insufficient. If morality is to function as an efficient guide to conduct, it cannot be propounded as self-justifying scheme, but must be embedded in a more comprehensive spiritual system, which grounds morality in a transpersonal order. Religion must affirm in the clearest terms that morality and ethical values are not mere decorative frills of personal opinion, not subjective superstructure, but intrinsic laws of cosmos built into the heart of reality."
Call it a bending back of the stream of awareness back upon oneself, upon one's own immediate concrete experience.